Everyone who is quietly becoming powerful right now looks, from the outside, exactly the same as they did 6 months ago. That's the part nobody tells you. Power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't post about itself. It doesn't ask for witnesses. The moment someone can actually see you changing, you've already lost the one advantage the change was supposed to give you: the advantage of surprise. You've been taught your whole life that becoming powerful means adding more discipline stacked on more discipline, more habits, more hustle, more hours. It doesn't work that way, and if it did, the amount of effort most people have already poured into themselves would have made them formidable by now. It hasn't, because effort poured into a leaking container doesn't accumulate. It just runs back out through the same holes it always has. You will recognize yourself in at least 3 of the next 8. Say nothing about it when you do. Niccolo Machiavelli spent years watching men rule and men be ruled, advising some of them directly, and he came away with a conclusion nobody wanted to hear at the time and still doesn't want to hear now. The leaders who lasted weren't the ones who performed strength the loudest. They were the ones who found their own weaknesses before their enemies did, and removed them privately before anyone got the chance to use them as leverage. He wasn't writing motivational literature. He was writing a survival manual for people whose mistakes got them killed, not just embarrassed. What follows belongs to that same cold, practical tradition. Not ancient trivia recycled for a caption. A functioning blueprint, still accurate, for a problem that hasn't changed in 500 years. The first leak sits so close to ordinary politeness that you've probably never once questioned it. Someone asks why you did something and you answer, every time automatically, almost before you've decided to. A decision gets questioned and you feel a small involuntary pull to make the other person comfortable with it. To lay out your reasoning, your context, the chain of logic that led you there, as though their understanding were somehow your responsibility to secure. You've been calling this respect, or transparency, or just being a decent person. It isn't any of those things. It's a leak, and it has a name: the constant need to explain yourself. Watch closely what actually happens the next time you do it. The person you're explaining to doesn't just passively receive information. They receive an opening. They start picking at your reasoning, looking for the weak joint in your logic, pressing exactly there. Because without meaning to, you've put yourself on trial and handed them the role of and jury. A person who has to justify a decision has already signaled, whether they realize it or not, that the decision was never fully theirs to make in the first place. Now picture someone who simply doesn't do this. Someone asks them why, and they say, "Because I decided to," and nothing more. Or they say nothing at all and let the silence do the work language usually does. The first time this reads as strange, maybe even rude. By the 5th time, it reads as authority. People stop asking, not because anyone told them to stop, but because they've quietly learned there's nothing to extract from the question anymore. The cost of over-explaining isn't abstract. Every justification you hand out in a negotiation, a family dispute, a workplace disagreement, breakup, is a data point the other party can and will use against you later, and the average person hands out 4 or 5 of these unforced data points a day without ever noticing the pattern. Machiavelli understood this exactly when that a ruler who must constant his choices to his own court has already lost that court's respect, whether or not he's lost their compliance. You don't need to fight for the right to stop explaining yourself. You simply stop. The fight was never necessary to begin with. It only ever existed in your head. There is a second leak, and for most of your life it has been mistaken for reliability. Somebody who never learns to withhold themselves eventually loses the one thing that makes them worth pursuing: the ability to be missed. That's the blunt version. The fuller version goes like this. You answer messages within minutes of receiving them. You say yes to invitations before you've even asked yourself whether you actually want to go. You make yourself reachable to almost anyone who wants a piece of your time, and you've been calling this being a good friend, a good employee, a good partner. What you're actually doing every single time is quietly destroying your own scarcity, and scarcity is the entire mechanism by which value gets assigned to a person's attention. Think honestly about the people whose time you personally value the most. They are, almost without exception, not the ones who respond in 90 seconds flat. They're the ones who are a little harder to reach, whose replies feel like they cost something to get. That difficulty isn't an accident of their personality, intentional or not. It's the exact reason you find yourself chasing them. Now picture someone in your life who did the opposite of what you've been doing, who let a full day pass before answering a message that used to get an instant reply, who declined 2 invitations in a row without over-apologizing for either one, who simply became a little less available than they used to be. Nobody staged an intervention. Nobody accused them of pulling away. People just quietly started describing them as busy, as in demand, as someone you have to plan around instead of someone who's always just there. And that description into the truth everyone around them now operates on, because perception, repeated often enough, becomes fact. The cost of constant availability compounds in a way most people never bother to calculate. Every instant reply trains that around you to expect the next one instantly too. And every expectation you meet without friction is one more unit of your own value spent for free, permanently without you ever getting anything back for it. Machiavelli wrote that a wise ruler uses even peacetime, the quiet, low-stakes stretches where nothing seems urgent, to prepare an advantage for the moment it will actually be tested. Build your scarcity now while nobody thinks to watch for it, and it will already be sitting in place, fully formed, by the time you need it to work for you. Here's a question worth sitting with for a moment before moving on. When was the last time you had a real emotional reaction, and the person who caused it genuinely didn't know? For most people, if they're honest, the answer is never. Every flinch, every flash of excitement, every hint of hurt crosses the face before the mind has finished processing what happened. And that is the third leak: visible emotional reaction. And it may be the single most exploitable habit an otherwise disciplined person can still be carrying. An emotional reaction is never private, no matter how it feels in the moment. It is a signal, broadcast in real time, to anyone paying enough attention, telling them exactly what affects you and exactly how much. Once somebody has that signal, they effectively hold a manual for operating you. They know which comment lands. They know which silence unsettles you. They know which specific question makes your voice change register without you noticing it changed. People who want leverage over you will use that manual, consciously or not, again and again, because it keeps working and because you keep reconfirming every single time your face gives you away first that it still works. Somebody who trains themselves to pause, not to suppress what they're feeling, but to insert a second of deliberate space between feeling it and displaying anything at all, becomes almost immediately harder to read, harder to predict, and by extension, far harder to manipulate. This has nothing to do with becoming cold or detached. It's entirely about the gap between the feeling and the display of the feeling, and that gap, even half a second wide, is where every ounce of real control actually lives. Machiavelli's own instruction on this was uncompromising. Never let emotion overpower judgment, because judgment, unlike emotion, can be concealed at will. One unguarded reaction in the wrong meeting, the wrong negotiation, the wrong argument with the wrong person, can undo months of careful positioning in a matter of seconds. Picture two people receiving the exact same piece of bad news in a room full of other people. One of them visibly deflates, their shoulders drop, their voice tightens, and everyone in that room quietly recalibrates how much pressure this person can actually absorb before they break. The other one receives the same news, pauses for a beat that feels almost imperceptible, and responds with a single measured question about next steps. Nothing was suppressed. The reaction still happened internally, in full. It simply wasn't handed out for free to a room full of people who had no right to it. 6 months later, when leadership is deciding who can be trusted with the next crisis, only one of those two people gets considered. And it was never about who felt less. It was only ever about who controlled what got shown. By now you've probably already recognized yourself once, maybe twice. That's expected, and it's not a coincidence. These leaks are common precisely because they're disguised as virtues. What you need to understand clearly is that the points still ahead of you do not carry the same weight as the ones behind you. The first few of these cost you opportunities. A missed edge here, a small leak there, nothing catastrophic on its own. The ones still coming cost you your future because they don't just drain a single moment. They drain an entire trajectory, quietly, year after year, until the gap between where you are and where you could have been is too wide to explain away as bad luck. The fourth leak hides inside something that feels, on the surface, like pure generosity. Giving away your best thinking for free to anyone who happens to ask. Somebody mentions a problem in passing, and you solve it on the spot, unprompted. Somebody drops a question in a group chat, and you're the one who writes 3 unpaid, uncredited paragraphs of real strategy at 11 at night. And a week later, nobody even remembers you were the one who solved it. You've been treating your own judgment as though it were an infinite, worthless resource, when in fact it's finite. And for the people who actually know how to use it correctly, it's valuable enough to build entire businesses on top of. Every piece of advice you hand out for free is an investment with no return attached to it whatsoever. And if you sat down and honestly tallied the strategic value you've given away over the last 12 months to people who never once returned the favor in any form, the number would almost certainly make you uncomfortable. Somebody who stops volunteering, who listens to a problem, nods to wait to directly and specifically ask before offering anything, and even then makes the other person articulate exactly what they've already tried first, isn't being cold or withholding for its own sake. They're pricing their own mind correctly, possibly for the first time in years, and when they finally do choose to share something, it lands completely differently, because everyone around them has learned, through repeated experience, that it was clearly costly to obtain. Machiavelli observed that a wise leader treats even the quiet, low-stakes moments as opportunities to build advantage, rather than opportunities to give advantage away for nothing. Free advice, handed out constantly and without discretion, is the exact opposite of that instinct. It is peacetime spent making everyone around you stronger while you personally stay exactly where you started. Ask yourself this one honestly, now, without softening the answer. How many people in your regular rotation actually leave you more capable after you've spent time with them? And how many simply take 3 hours out of your week and give you back nothing but familiarity? That question is blunt on purpose, because the fifth leak, comfort friendships kept alive out of habit rather than any real value exchange, survives specifically because almost nobody is willing to ask it directly, even privately. These relationships rarely look like leaks from the inside. They look like loyalty, like shared history, like simply being a decent, dependable person. But every hour spent maintaining a connection that adds nothing back is an hour that could have gone toward building the version of your life that actually needs building. And most people are quietly carrying 2 or 3 relationships like this without ever once running the math on what they actually cost across a year. The alternative isn't a dramatic confrontation, a tearful conversation about where this friendship is going. That would only manufacture exactly the enemy and public story you're trying to avoid creating. The alternative is simpler and considerably colder. You respond a little slower than you used to, you initiate a little less often, you accept fewer invitations without offering an explanation for any single one of them, and the relationship fades on a timeline that nobody can point to and call an ending. Nobody gets to say that's when it happened, because there wasn't a moment like that. 6 months later, the other person has simply assumed that life got busy, and they've moved on without ever feeling rejected by you specifically. Machiavelli's writing on alliances makes essentially the same point in a harsher register. A ruler who keeps weak, costly alliances alive purely out of sentiment, rather than clear-eyed strategy, ends up weakening the entire structure built around him. Loyalty to something that no longer actually serves you isn't a virtue worth defending. It's a hole in the bucket, dressed up convincingly as virtue. There's a specific test worth applying privately, never out loud. Imagine you met this exact person for the very first time today, as the exact person you are now, with the exact goals you currently have. Would you choose to build this relationship from scratch? For the ones that add real value, the answer arrives immediately and without hesitation. For the ones that have simply survived on inertia and shared history, the hesitation itself is the answer, and it's worth listening to. You probably already suspect what the 6th one is, because you can feel it every single time you catch yourself talking about how hard you're working. Visible effort. The tired posts, the constant grinding language, the running public commentary on exactly how much you're struggling towards something. All of it feels, in the moment, like honesty, like relatable transparency. All of it is actually a leak, because it tells everyone watching precisely how strained you are, precisely how close to breaking you might be, and precisely how much your eventual result actually cost you personally to produce. Competitors read visible strain as an open door. Well-meaning people read it as an invitation to help in ways that quietly attach strings you'll be paying off later. And everyone watching, whether they mean to or not, starts pricing your eventual outcome against the visible effort they watched you display along the way, which cheapens that outcome the second it finally arrives, no matter how genuinely impressive it actually is. Somebody who works exactly as hard, often considerably harder, but says nothing publicly about any of it, who simply posts the finished result and lets everyone else assume it arrived with relative ease, controls something the visibly struggling version of them could never control. The entire story. People never actually experience your effort directly. They only experience what you allow them to see, and what they're allowed to see becomes, in their own minds, the entire truth of the matter. Machiavelli's own line on this remains one of his sharpest observations. Everyone sees what you appear to be, but very few people ever get close enough to experience what you actually are. For almost everyone watching you, appearance is the only data they will ever receive. Decide deliberately what that data communicates. There is a very specific kind of person everyone has met at least once. The one whose success seems to have simply arrived, fully formed, with no visible runway behind it. That absence of visible runway isn't luck, and it isn't some effortless natural gift either. Almost every time, it's a person who did the exact same grinding, uncertain, frustrating work as everyone else, but drew a hard line around who got to witness the process. What the audience receives in the end is only ever the finished product arriving with no context attached, and the human mind, faced with a result and no visible cost behind it, fills that gap in with the most flattering possible story. Talent, ease, let them fill it in. Correcting the story costs you nothing to withhold and costs you plenty to correct. There's an irony worth pausing on here, one that Machiavelli himself was never able to escape in his own lifetime. The man who wrote the most cited, most studied playbook on acquiring and holding power died largely forgotten. Exiled from the political career he spent his whole life trying to claw his way back into. Buried without any of the influence he had devoted to studying and describing so precisely for other people to use. Understanding the mechanics of power, in his own case, was never enough on its own to secure it for him personally. Knowledge without quiet, consistent, unglamorous execution is just an essay, however well argued. That's worth remembering right about now, because the temptation at this point in the list is to feel as though understanding these 8 leaks means you've already sealed them. You haven't. Understanding a leak and actually sealing a leak are 2 entirely separate actions, separated in practice by months of behavior that nobody watching you will ever see you perform. The 7th leak is the one responsible for making people comfortable pushing you, again and again, straight past lines you once swore were fixed and non-negotiable. Negotiable standards. You set a requirement, someone tests it once, and it moves, not because you consciously changed your mind about anything, but because holding the line felt harder in that specific moment than simply bending it did. Do this enough times, even occasionally, and the people around you learn something quietly true about you. Your no is provisional. It has built-in flex that a firm enough push can find. So they keep pushing because pushing has worked on you before, and every successful push teaches them, without a single word being exchanged, to push a little further than next time around. The fix here isn't a louder, more dramatic boundary. A louder boundary just invites a louder argument about whether the boundary is even fair in the first place. The real fix is a boundary that doesn't move and, critically, doesn't explain itself while not moving. Somebody who holds a line in total silence, without ever debating its fairness, without narrating the act of holding it, becomes something people eventually stop testing altogether, not because they were persuaded by an argument, but because they ran into something solid enough times that testing it stopped being worth the ongoing friction. Machiavelli's observation that people judge far more by what they can see than by what can actually touch applies with unusual precision here. They need to physically feel the wall exist before they'll fully believe it's real, and not just a claim. An announced standard functions like a fence with a gate somebody's convinced they can eventually find. A silently, consistently enforced standard functions like a wall. And now the last one, the leak every single one of the previous 7 quietly traces its roots back to. The need, approval. It's the reason you explain yourself constantly. To be understood clearly enough to earn approval for the decision. It's the reason you stay endlessly available, to remain liked, needed, chosen. It's the reason your face shows every emotion the instant you feel it. Because being visibly affected invites sympathy. And sympathy is simply another form of approval, wearing a softer name. It's the reason you give your best advice away for nothing. Because being useful earns approval too, cheaply and reliably. It's the reason the comfort friendships persist long past their usefulness. The reason the effort stays visible. The reason the standards keep bending under pressure. Every single leak before this one is a different strategy your mind independently invent to secure the exact same underlying thing. External proof that you are acceptable, worthy, enough, and that need is the master leak. because sealing any one of the other 7 without ever addressing this one underneath them is only ever temporary. The need for approval will simply invent a brand new hole somewhere else in the bucket to replace the one you just patched. The way out of this isn't loudly announcing your independence from other people's opinions. That's just another performance, engineered to earn approval for supposedly not needing approval. And it collapses under its own contradiction the moment anyone examines it. The real way out is quieter and slower than that. It's building an internal check that runs before the external one even has a chance to activate. You make a decision, and instead of immediately scanning the room to see how it lands with everyone around you, you ask yourself first privately whether it actually aligns with what you want. And if the honest answer is yes, you consider the matter settled, full stop. Do this consistently day after day, and the entire elaborate architecture built to chase approval eventually starts going quiet on its own. Because for the first time in a long time, it no longer has a job left to do. Here's what to actually do with all of this, starting tonight, not eventually, not once things calm down. First, pick exactly one of these 8 leaks, the one that stung the most while you were listening to it just now. And for the next 7 days straight, don't tell a single living person that you're working on it. Just behave differently and let everyone around you draw their own conclusions in their own time. Second, the very next time someone asks you to explain a decision you've already made, practice giving the shortest true answer you can physically manage, even if it's a single sentence long, and deliberately resist the pull to add a second sentence justifying the first one. Third, keep a private note somewhere only you can see, where you log every single time you catch one of these 8 leaks happening in real time as it happens. Don't share the note with anyone, ever. Its only real purpose is to make the pattern impossible for you, specifically to keep pretending you don't see. And a fourth, smaller one to close with. Before you answer any request for your time, your advice, or your emotional bandwidth this week, pause for 3 full seconds and silently ask which leak, if any, you'd be feeding by saying yes. Some of the time the honest answer will still be yes. That's fine. The point was never to eliminate every instinct toward generosity or warmth. The point was to make sure a decision is actually being made by you instead of a leak making it for you out of pure habit. At the start of all this, you were told that everyone who is quietly becoming powerful right now looks, from the outside, exactly the same as they did 6 months ago. That was the paradox, and it's still the entire point, unchanged. You are not going to announce a single piece of this. You're not going to post about which leak you're currently sealing, and you're not going to ask anyone in your life to hold you accountable to any of it. You are simply going to stop doing specific things, one at a time, quietly, while everyone around you keeps assuming you're exactly the person you've always been, right up until the moment they finally notice you aren't. And by then there will be nothing left for them to interfere with. This channel isn't here to teach you how to perform power for an audience watching from the outside. It's here to keep handing you the actual mechanics for building real power in the places where nobody is watching at all. Come back when you're ready for the next leak.